Well, at the moment, we're waiting to see what is going to happen with the government of national unity. We expected it to be announced this afternoon, but apparently it's been postponed to tomorrow or to Sunday. And I have Professor Theo Venter from the University of Johannesburg to try to make sense of what is happening and what have we hit a bumpy patch or what is happening. Theo, welcome to National Security News.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and I must just apologize. I've just moved into a new house. I'm not leaving South Africa. It's just a change of scenery. So I'm still packing my books back in my shelf.
Okay. So what do you think is happening behind the scenes? Is President Ramaphosa getting cold feet?
I heard similar rumors, but I think one must be realistic. When Ramaphosa when the date was announced that he will be inaugurated the 19th, there was a huge optimism that we will have a cabinet announced by this afternoon, Friday, which of course is a very, very short time to get 7 political parties, your ducks in a row, the demands by each political party, because internally, I think there's a lot of demands. I do not think the soft-spokenness on the outside, that of course, except Helen Zille, is really what's happening. I think it's a hard bargain, and I think in the case of the ANC, the bargain is even harder because they must have an internal hard bargain with the SACP, with Kusatu, and these guys. And factions in the ANC, and then a hard bargain to the outside. And the big questions are things such as, will we see a proportional cabinet? DA has 22% of the vote. Will they have 22% of cabinet? Or will the president use his prerogative and appoint 2 positions where he thinks people are suited for those positions? We just don't know. And I must say on this question of we just don't know, I was in Cape Town last week and spoke to a lot of people, and we speak quite often to each other and to other analysts and members of all the political parties. I haven't seen 2 weeks in South African politics since the election of so little leaking out. I'm not sure what's happening inside, but virtually nothing is leaking out. And I'm just wondering, why is it? It's the first time really that we are grasping for small little streams, and there's nothing coming.
So what are the obstacles, do you think, at the moment?
I think the biggest obstacles are twofold, and that is that we have an open-ended government of national unity, meaning the president said very specifically that I'm inviting everybody. It's your choice whether you get on the bus or not. Now, we know that 2 groups, MK and the EFF, already indicated they don't want to be passengers on this bus. Other political parties were a little hesitant. The DA and the IFP were immediately on the bus, I guess, trying to look for the best seats on this bus. We now have a driver. He's officially the president in his 2nd term. The question is, how do you deal with the seats on this bus, if I can call it that? Because you have 2 political parties that I think can expect more than 1 or 2 ministers in cabinet, and then you have several political parties, small ones, including the PAC and the Freedom Front since yesterday, and so on, all wanted to be part of this situation. And I think as people get onto the bus, it complicates the arrangement or the seating arrangement, if we can call this cabinet a bus. And the question is, can we do it in 2 phases? Can we appoint, let's say, ministers and then afterwards deputy ministers? Or are we going to wait until everything is settled and then we announce? And I think if we look at Cyril Ramaphosa over the last 5 years, as well as the year or what that he took from Jacob Zuma, he has never been quick on anything in terms of announcements. The only thing that he did ahead of time was the announcement that Judge Maya will be the next Chief Justice. That he did like in quick succession. There was no waiting for that. But I think what we are seeing now is he's subtle at his best, taking his time. And I heard some rumors that we will hear the announcement on Saturday. Well, that's tomorrow. I also heard that it will be on Sunday. I'm not holding my breath. I think it may even take longer than that.
So what are the risks for him if this does not come off, if the DA walks away from the table?
Yeah, I think that's highly unlikely that the DA will walk away. The DA may take a different approach and they may want to do different things. But you see, let's go back to the bus again. We have now appointed a bus driver. And the next appointment had to be the conductor. And that we already have Toko Didiza as the Speaker in Parliament, and a deputy being a DA, Dr. Lotri. Now, that means there has been a discussion of how this canvas will look in future. I think what we are now seeing is the difficulty of the detail on the canvas. And that is where I think political parties driving a hard bargain. And I can see some pushback from the ANC, and I can see some demands from the DA and others. But the risks are as follows. The South African economy has seen a tremendous upbeat approach, a positive climate in the next 2 or 3 days, or the last 2 or 3 days, with the rand strengthening and the stock exchange showing 3 to 5% growth. If this takes too long, we are going to have the same situation we had with Ramaphosa 5 or 6 years ago, where the markets immediately jump and say, okay, now we have taken a new direction. Let's support this direction. But if it takes too long, people will say, okay, back to the old game. And that I don't think any of the political parties can afford.
And there's even a worse risk if he walks away for himself within the ANC as well.
I can't see the ANC walking away. I've heard that, but I can't see that, and I can't see the DA walking away. They may take a different approach. They may be a little bit more careful, but, in my experience, if a politician has a sniff of power in the nose, and if they have wind of even sharing power, I don't think you can stop them. I think they in one direction, and that is to get where the power is. And I say that very brutally, but in a sense, that is what I think is happening. The question is, in what way are they going to get it? Are they happy with what the ANC is giving? Because we must remember, my biggest fear was that although we have a minority ANC at 40%, the ANC culture is that of a dominant culture, and it has developed over 30 years. You don't change a 30-year culture of being in command, being in control overnight. The president gave some wonderful speeches, the last 2 speeches, and he sounded very much statement-like. And I think most South Africans could deal with that, and they said, well, that is how a president should act, not in the interest of his party, but in the interest of the country. But I think that issue that the newspapers were on for many years, can the ANC put own interest before national interest? I think we are at that point now. And the detail of that deal is far more complicated than most people think.
And the nation is waiting for a deal. That's what they want.
Yeah. In the Afrikaans literature, we had a very important writer, Elsa Joubert. She did some wonderful work. But in the 60s, she wrote a book, Ons wag op die kaptein. We're waiting on the captain. And I think we are there. We are there now. We wait on the captain to make the announcement to see if South Africa can really get in the trajectory, in the direction of a government of national unity, and the participants are happy with what they get.
And we're probably waiting for him to be the Mandela that knows how to bridge these differences.
Well, he used a lot of the Mandela symbolism in speeches and the way in which he did it and those kind of things. I think that's no secret, but he is no Mandela. He is Cyril Ramaphosa. What made him a little bit better than Mandela in terms of what we are seeing at the moment, he is usually at his best when he's the facilitator among the power-hungry and people that wants to deal. That he does better, I think, than what he does as a manager of a major economy or a major country, because I think he waits too long for his decisions. But if you have to be facilitating different approaches, I think that he can do very well.
Can we look at some of the other parties? The MK party did surprisingly bad in by-elections in KwaZulu-Natal. So, what do you think is the reason behind that?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at the by-elections. We can also say the IFP and the DA did extremely well. That's the other side of what you're saying, gaining 3 to 4 seats each in local by-elections in KwaZulu-Natal, the heartland of MK. MK only got 1 out of about 18 by-elections that took place. And I think this is the situation after the election. There's a new reality coming in. And it shows that the MK party went to a national election with one icon in its middle, Jacob Zuma, and very little party organization. Now, if you want to do by-elections in local government, you need structures, you need branches, you need people that can carry people to the voting booths or taking them there, or you need logistics. That in MK is totally absent. At the moment, they are playing games because at the one side they're saying they're not going to parliament, they want to take the whole election to court, where we know they will not have any success. But on the other hand, they are now preparing for going to Parliament, and they've just appointed Judge Slope as the chief whip of the party. Now, that was a big surprise. We now see how these guys are getting together. We always assumed that there was something happening there. Remember, Slope got into trouble when he tried to convince 2 other judges to have a lighter kind of approach to the Jacob Zuma problems he had in the court at different places. And now they've appointed him in a very senior position. The chief whip is actually 2nd or 3rd in command of a political party. Really, really high up. Very interesting. I think they'll end up in Parliament. The salaries that you get in Parliament is significant, and there's 58 of them that is currently not receiving anything from Parliament. So I'll see that sooner rather than later. But again, you have this almost paradoxical approach. On the one hand, you're contesting the election in the courts. You want to overthrow it. You claim that votes were stolen, which is statistically, I mean, if you look at what they've presented to the courts, it is a statistical impossibility, what they're claiming. And I think they're going to fail on that. But on the other hand, they're preparing their structures to go to Parliament and to play a specific role. And they've also last week made the announcement of the Progressive Alliance with several other parties. And I guess the EFF, if Julius Malema is over his court case in the Eastern Cape, they will all probability play a role in that progressive alliance as well.
You at some stage predicted that he's going to be a spoiler. He's not interested in being part of the political process. Do you still think that?
Absolutely. What he's doing is spoiling. He spoiled the first session of Parliament. He spoiled the inauguration of the president, being the only ex-president not attending. He's spoiling several other things. Yeah. We thought he can be a flash in the pan or a spoiler. Well, clearly, it was not a flash in the pan. And clearly, he's towards a spoiler. But spoilers can only stay spoilers for so long. And what we see with the spoiling tactics of MK, they're putting EFF under pressure. Because suddenly, the commander-in-chief of the EFF is now referring to himself as the president. And he's wearing suits and not overalls. Now, that is already two major changes for the EFF. They have to do things differently now because MK is taking all the media attention.
So what do you see happening to the MK party and Zuma?
Well, I see the MK party will now form what they actually had to form before the election, and that is to have a conference, to elect structures, to have formalized the roles of the Secretary General, their constitution, the policies, and so on. So they're actually doing things a little bit in reverse. They remind me very much about township forming in South Africa. If you read the handbooks, you'll see that when you form a new town or a township, you do the bulk services first, you get some tarred roads, you get water in pipes and electricity and so on and so on. In South Africa, first you occupy the land, and then you try to make a road between the different houses, and then you bring the electricity, and then you bring the water. So it's a little upside down, and it seems to me MK is forming itself in that typical South African upside down way.
Do you think they're a danger to our society and to the new constitutional order that 70% of the electorate wanted?
I do think they pose a problem for the rule of law, together with the EFF, and I do think they present a danger to the constitutional order. But luckily, they're a very small portion, and we already are witnessing a hardening towards MK from the government side. The first obvious sign, apart from the first of the Sunday evening at the IEC, but the fact that KwaZulu-Natal now has a government of provincial unity formed by 3 or 4 minority groups or minority parties, which is totally the other way around. In all the other places, the dominant party were given the choice of forming a provincial government, but not in KwaZulu-Natal. That is definitely a hardening of position. And it's very difficult to sustain your spoiling tactics if government is playing hardball. And I think that's what they will do with MK.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Thank you so much, Professor Theo Venter.
My pleasure.